Eggy on the PC6001. I'm not talking about Sega and Nintendo, I'm talking about games and game systems that are much less, well, mainstream. And in this episode I'm visiting another one of those Japanese systems that doesn't get a lot of attention outside of its native land. The PC6001 was NEC's entry-level 8-bit machine. Less powerful and less expensive than the better known PC88 range, it was also, it would seem, less popular, at least when it came to software support. Based on a Z80 processor, the original 6001 was somewhat hampered by its limited and perhaps just downright ugly graphics capabilities. Using the Motorola 6847 video chip, the same as you'll find in the Tandy Coco and Acorn Atom amongst others, it could display up to 9 colours at once on screen, but only in its very blocky character mode. Higher resolutions could be achieved, but with a more limited, and in some modes, pretty garish choice of colours. The expanded 6001 Mark II and 6601 models, first released in 1983, did an awful lot better when it came to visual appeal, with higher resolutions and a much less nauseating colour palette. Many of the later games made good use of these features, including some, for the time, pretty impressive looking arcade conversions. Though the 6000 series didn't really do nearly as well as some of NEC's other systems in the games department overall, particularly the original models, there are still some gems that are worth looking at today, with Eggy being one of the real standout titles, released by Bothtech in 1985. And yes, Eggy does sound very 8-bit home computerish, doesn't it? Sounds like something featured in your computer circa the mid-80s, possibly as a type-in listing. For reasons that aren't entirely clear now, eggs seem to loom large in 80s gaming, what with Dizzy the Egg, Chucky Egg, Eggaland, and a surprising number of other egg-themed games. In this case, you're playing as Ina the egg-shaped mech, defending the planet Eggy from your typical classic shooting game style alien invasion. Set on an infinitely scrolling 2D plane, this game does bring to mind classic arcade shooters like Defender and Choplifter, but Eggy does things its own way. The controls and play mechanics are a little bit confusing and counterintuitive to begin with, and frankly not all that easy to explain, but they do work surprisingly well when you've got the hang of them. By pushing left or right you can walk along the ground, but not shoot. To start blasting, you'll need to take to the air. This is done by holding down and charging up your eggy legs, for want of a better term, and when you let go you'll spring forth into the sky. Once airborne you can start taking out those enemies that are swarming around by hitting the fire button and letting rip. You can prolong your jump by pressing up, but at the cost of some speed and manoeuvrability. It gets more complicated from here on because all the while your fuel level will slowly be ticking down. Get hit by an enemy or projectile and that number will jump down even further. Luckily, your fuel can be replenished thanks to those walking enemy mechs called Zorums. Hit one of them with your guns once and only once and they'll change colour. If you walk over them in this state, your fuel level will shoot back up. Running out of Zorms to harvest? Well, hitting one of those humans walking around will turn them straight into a Zorm, allowing you to zap them for fuel once again. The object of each stage is to collect the falling packages and ideally protect those humans as much as possible. Whether you've collected them or not, the stage will end after a certain number of packages have dropped, and if you've survived, you'll be awarded bonus points for packages collected and humans saved. All in all, it is a pretty bizarre and inventive mix, and one that, well, you'll have to trust me, plays better than it sounds. Now, it's got to be said that this is not a game with a lot of narrative depth or deep game mechanics. Clearly inspired by arcade games of the time, this is Twitch gaming and nothing more. You could call it repetitive, and I suppose many games of this era were, but it's still a very engaging and oddly addictive arcade blaster. Most of all, this reminds me of games from Ultimate on the ZX Spectrum or those early Activision Atari 2600 games. Simple, arcade-style action games with a lot of polish and well thought out features. This is a cleverly designed and pretty original take on the genre, and given the limitations of the system, good looking and technically impressive. As it turns out, this game was a bit of a hit at the time, in Japan at least, ultimately being ported to a number of other popular Japanese platforms, including NEC's own PC88 and the MSX. It's still regarded there as a bit of a classic today, it would seem, so much so that it was apparently the inspiration for the name of Project Egg, Japan's own good old game style online classic game platform. Now, if you do want to try this game out for yourself, you may not be massively surprised to find out that an original copy and the machine to play it on won't be massively cheap or easy to get hold of. The only copy I was able to find was going for £170 or around $220. Some consolation, however, as the aforementioned Project Egg does unsurprisingly feature this game, although not the original release, only the PC88 and MSX versions, so far at least. The service does have an English portal and will accept PayPal, so if you do want to give it a try, you won't have too much trouble setting it up.